When did you do this? And tell us about the growth. That's an incredible number.
Yeah, in 2011, my brother told me about Bitcoin, and I realized it was going to really disintermediate a lot of markets. And so by 2013, we launched the first cryptocurrency fund in the U.S. And now we've launched a handful of other funds, venture funds, and multi-currency.
When you say, I mean, it's a disruptor, obviously. I'm just trying to see. A long time ago, Jamie Dimon said it's a fraud. Now, recently, I spoke with him, and he said, "I'm sorry, I said it. I wish I didn't say it." But do you think that Bitcoin is taking out the middleman, meaning banks? Is that one reason, sort of the big banks were skeptical?
Yeah, that you've had to pay a third party to move money around the world or to do other financial transactions. With Bitcoin, you can literally do it for free instantaneously. It's like emailing money.
Anyway, well, it's a 20,000% performance since 2013. Why not call it quits? I mean, that's the best return I've ever had.
No, this is a multi-decade thing. It's like the internet. In the early 90s, you didn't know about Snapchat or, all these new Uber-type applications. That's what Bitcoin's like. It's the final piece of the internet protocol puzzle.
Well, so along those lines, we're hearing you can buy next season Maverick tickets with Bitcoin, and there's some other retailers that do accept Bitcoin. But the volatility in 2017, over 5 times, it's gone down 30% or more.
Yep.
We saw that move in the last couple of days. That alone kind of discredits it as a currency. So how is that going to impact its probability of, displacing the U.S. dollar or others in the future?
Yeah, so it's incredibly volatile, and this is really the first time in history people complain that a currency's bad because it goes up too fast. We've had the Venezuelan Bolivar and the Argentine peso and all these things go down. So Bitcoin's not great for pricing coffee right now. Like it's not good for that. But it's great for moving money across borders, for speculating, for all these use cases. And in 10 or 15 years, it's going to be good for buying a coffee.
Kevin Shipp said, and I want to see if this is your thing too, because people are living in fear. Oh, we can't do anything. They're the deep state. Who do these people think they are? Who do these people, these criminal weasels, Luciferian, child molesters, child rapists, think they are?
Let me tell you who they are. They are everything you've just said, but they've also been able to control the judicial system, the legislative system, and the executive branch of the government. And they also run the money supply. They've had complete control. And anyone who speaks out against them gets hammered one way or the other. Now, I can give you an example with me. I mean, I'm sure you get a lot of threats, Greg, when you present information. I know I do through our show.
Oh, I get this surely will be demonetized. It'll get 100-something thousand views. At least that's on a counter. And they'll take away every dime that I would get for this. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care.
Well, I don't either. And I'll tell you, when Obama was president, and I had spoken against Obamacare from the very beginning, since 2009, I said, look, let me put on my healthcare policy hat. Here's what's wrong about it, and here's why it's going to be more costly, it's going to be unaffordable, it's going to be unavailable, it's going to reduce the quality of care. We need healthcare reform, free market-based. This is the stuff I was talking about with Reagan in '88, of which Reagan started implementing it, but then George H.W. Bush shut it down.
You met face-to-face with Reagan.
Right. Who I dealt with on a regular basis was C. Everett Koop and Jack Kemp, and they're the ones who would then deliver the information to Reagan. So they were the conduits with Reagan.
Okay.
Dave Janda was hey Ron, how's it going today? No. I was a guy they brought in who was on the front line of healthcare delivery, who had worked in prevention, who had found a way to cut $2 billion in healthcare costs by spending $2,000. Okay, so I was the guy they brought into the White House as the guy who had some policy experience, but was also boots on the ground guy, and guy who would work with C. Everett Koop, who was a great man, Jack Kemp, who I had a lot of respect for. I know there are some folks that had some issues with him, but I had great respect for him and found him to be very honest. They were the conduit. They were the big guys that dealt with Reagan. But when I started shooting my mouth off about Obamacare and just telling the truth, and I did this YouTube presentation that was 6 minutes long that ended up with like 2.9 million hits, I all of a sudden was targeted. And and this is how they work, or how they used to work, I hope, with past tense. In June of 2012 or 2013, I think it was, I got a notice from the IRS, you're being audited. And I thought, okay, well, and then they, without even looking at 1 year's return, all of a sudden they wanted 3 years returns. And when my accountants met with them, I said, before you go in and talk to them, I want you to ask them one question, and that is, why are the Jandas being audited? They already pay you a lot of money. They've never had a problem. They don't have any offshore investments. They invest in their kids' education. Why are they being audited? And they go, well, what do you think they're going to say, Dave? I go, you know what? I think they're so arrogant enough, and they want to send a message to me. I think what they're going to say is it's related to me being against Obamacare, okay? And having something to do with, how I spout my mouth off on the radio show. Well, okay, Dave, we're going to do this, but... Well, they met with them, and they come out, they came out, and they give me a call, and they go, hey, Dave, you got to sit down for this. And I go, why? They go, well, we asked your question you wanted when we first started meeting with them. And they look straight at us, and they go, it has everything to do with his radio show. And they go, it went on that it was obvious that they were really upset about your opposition to Obamacare. And that audit, Greg, lasted 9 months. And it got to be absolutely ridiculous, okay? When I give speeches around the country on healthcare policy, I don't ask to get paid. I don't get paid. And I don't because I believe it's my patriotic and civic duty to provide information, okay? So the IRS looks at this and they go, well, he didn't get paid to give all these talks. Well, no, he doesn't want to get paid because he believes it's his patriotic duty to tell information that the media is not providing and the government's not providing. Well, we've never heard of this. Well, now you have. Well, when I would fly on my own dime to a place to give a presentation, and stay in a hotel and that kind of stuff, I took that as an expense, which is a legitimate expense according to my accountants. And the IRS thought so too, but they said, well, we can't approve this until we have a little more documentation. They go, well, what do you need? Well, we want the programs over the past 3 years of every place he spoke at. Well, I saved them. So we gave them to him. And then they came back and they go, well, we need some more information. Well, what more do you want? You have his receipts. They're all documented. You have the program. Well, just because his name's on the program doesn't mean he actually spoke. We would like a letter from every place he spoke that he actually spoke on that date, at that time, on that topic.
My God.
No problem. I save emails. So what we did, thank you emails. So I get rid of them, save the thank you ones. So we redacted names, addresses, all that kind of stuff, but it documented what I spoke on, where I spoke, thank you very much, great presentation, blah, blah, blah. We handed that to them. They go, oh, he has those. Yeah. Well, we need one other piece of information. Well, what's that? We need the name of every person in the crowd of all the places he spoke at over the past 3 years before we'll approve these deductions. And my accountants threw down threw it right down and said, whoa, this is unconstitutional, this is harassment based, this is over the top. And they said, well, we have to make sure there weren't any federal officials in the crowd, because if there were, then that could be seen as potential lobbying, and lobbying expenses are not deductible.
Oh my God.
That's the kind of harassment they put people through that are looking out for the freedom and the welfare and the health of every American. That's you say, what kind of people are in this system? That's the type of person. That's the lowest learners of the system.
She may not get a pass after all with this IG report too.
I hope not, because people like her should not. It's not just the bigs that should come down in this. It's all the people that were implementers of their reign of terror. And understand something, Greg, this is not just a Democrat issue, okay? I call them the Republicrats. And the reason I call them that is because, Reagan was trying to implement some of the free market stuff that we were talking about in '88, which would still work today if they do it. But what I found was, whether it was a Bush or a Clinton or Obama, they wanted nothing to do. Nothing. There was no difference between any of them. And they're all owned and operated by this syndicate. And it goes back to a conversation I had early in 1988 with Jack Kemp. And I said, Jack, I go, this city is, God, it's bad. And he said, Dave, it's bad because the vast majority of folks are either being bribed or they're being blackmailed. And that prevents really good solutions like we're trying to come up with from being implemented. And I said to him, and I've asked hundreds of individuals I've come in contact with that are legit people behind the curtain, good people in government, and said, what percentage of folks do you think are either bribed or blackmailed or just complicit in this whole thing? And the answer I keep getting, Greg, across the board is 99%.
Oh, God.
And that's why, Greg, this Inspector General's report, this executive order, this proclamation that I read from Donald Trump about the National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month, because one of the control mechanisms the globalists use that's the most effective is the human trafficking pedophile situation.
The media won't cover it because you said to me in the pre-interview they're part of it.
Yeah.
The media is part of it. They're protecting their bosses.
And all you have to do is look at the CIA program. What, Operation Mockingbird? Where they talk about how they infiltrate every aspect of the media to deliver the globalist message.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are complicit in it, Greg.
Yeah, that's why they didn't like me at the networks, because
right. That's exactly why you're not there, Greg. Because you're an honest guy, and you're a guy who can't be bought. And guess what, Greg? They have no use for you.
That's right.
Just as they don't have any use for me because of this mouth.
Big things are happening, and we should tell people to be. And I don't want to call it hopium. I don't want to, call it. I don't want to give people a false, hope. But good things are happening in Washington, and the bad guys are going to be taken to task. Is that right?
Yes, but, and here's the but. People cannot be bench players any longer. Okay? The time is now. And it's every one of our listeners needs to be calling their congressmen, their senators, their governors, their members of the House and Senate in their respective states and all I have to do is say this: we're watching you. And understand something. We want you finally to do what's right for every person in this country. Restore the rule of law, support the rule of law being implemented, because if you don't, every person I know is going to mobilize against you and make sure that you do not even make it through the primary in an election. We are going to put somebody up against you to defeat you and get you out of your leather chair unless you get off your butt and do something for our country and restore our freedoms, our liberties, and our rule of law.
And that's where we're going to leave it. Dr. Dave Janda, thank you for coming on and giving some, give us what your sources are saying. Also, breaking some news about the missile being shot at you're saying your sources say actual missile shot at Hawaii from Chinese ships. The Chinese took care of that. Also, that big arrest, big things are going to happen with this IG report, and a lot of folks are going to be either bounced out of office or go to jail.
And understand something. I understand people are going to take all this with a huge grain of salt, and they should. And they should look at alternative sources for confirmation of what we talked about today. But one of the things to watch is what happens January 18th with the Petro-Yuan. If that Petro-Yuan contract goes through, what that tells me is this dichotomy within the Chinese government isn't as big as my contacts have told me.
Lots of things going on in the background that you're not seeing in the mainstream press, and that's what I have you on for, to develop it, so we don't have this QAnon and MegaAnon, which I want to talk about in a minute. Their sources are good, but they're anonymous. You're not, and I can vouch for you, and you can vouch for your sources. I know you have very good sources. Some of them I know who they are, and I'm not going to say who they are, but this Inspector General report that we just had, 1,200,000 pages, that was delivered Friday. Your sources confirm it was delivered. A top reporter confirmed it was delivered. What are the implications of this Inspector General's report being delivered to Congress?
Well, there was a headline on Zero Hedge that said the upcoming OIG report, now the report that was filed, likely to trigger second special counsel. Comey, Lynch, and Clinton are now in the crosshairs. I believe that's accurate. First of all, many people believe the Inspector General's report was not going to happen, was not going to be turned in. I haven't been. It has been documented to me through my sources, and actually through a very good reporter on Capitol Hill, who has won the Edward R. Murrow Award for reporting, for his excellence in reporting on what's been happening in Washington. His name is Chad Pergram, and on Friday he documented, Friday, January 12th, that report, 1.2 million pages, was delivered to Congress. And it was delivered to particular individuals in Congress. The head of the House Judiciary Committee, Goodlate, the head of the House Intel Committee, Devin Nunes, and I also believe Senator Grassley, the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And the reason why this is important is because that Inspector General's report, I believe, will reset, if you will reset the system as it relates to the rule of law in this country. The rule of law in this country has been abandoned, has been massacred by the globalists. That was not by accident, it was by intent. And the rule of law was used to persecute people that were freedom fighters and against the globalist system. And the rule of law was, if you will, shoved to the side so that you name the globalists, whether it's the Bushes or the Clintons or the Obamas, puppets, Soros, all these other puppets of the globalists, could act out the globalist game plan. And what the Inspector General's report, this 1.2 million pages, I believe, and many people believe, and my sources have told me, will lead to a significant escalation of what the rule of law should be and what this country was about from its onset. Now, many people say, okay, so in fact the report was delivered, but nothing's going to happen. Well, as you know, Greg, 2 hours after that report was delivered, headline, not on CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN. If you're going to wait for that, forget it. You're going to be 10 years down the line before this stuff starts to percolate through the lamestream fake media. But Zero Hedge, breaking, first Uranium One indictment unsealed. Maryland man indicted on 11 counts of bribery and fraud. Now, some people might say, that's Zero Hedge, come on. Well, okay, let's go to the Justice Department website, justice.gov. An indictment against a former co-president of a Maryland-based transportation company that provides services for the transportation of nuclear materials to customers in the United States and abroad was unsealed today for his alleged role in a scheme that involved the bribery of an official at a subsidiary Russian state Atomic Energy Corporation involved in the Uranium One deal. You see, the Inspector General's report is going to unearth, as Zero Hedge alluded to, it's going to unearth issues related to the collusion in the Department of Justice and the FBI about the possible, if you will, re-engineering of the election results in 2016, of the illegal surveillance, not just of Trump, but of millions of Americans whose Fourth Amendment rights were violated. It's going to reopen the Clinton Foundation and their pay-to-play program, of which Uranium One is just a part. Remember, the facts associated with Uranium One. 20% of the uranium supply in the United States was delivered to Russia, and the Clinton Foundation made a cool $145 million, and Bill Clinton,
that we know of,
speech for $500,000 at a bank in Moscow associated with the Uranium One deal. It's also going to open, this Inspector General's report, Hillary's emails. Now, there are people that are going to say, you know what, Dave, I don't think this is going to happen. Because, you know, for Horowitz to get up to the Inspector General level, he has to be a player in the deep state. If you follow, and if you go on, don't Google it because they follow obviously everything you do, but I use DuckDuckGo as a search engine. Go to DuckDuckGo and type in Michael Horowitz testifying before Congress. Listen to his testimonies that he has given over the past several years. It's devastating, where he goes after the Obama administration, Eric Holder, Loretta Lynch, for tying up Inspector General's hands, for not letting them present information on behalf of the public. No, I think this guy is part of the reason we're going to get the rule of law back. And many people say, well, you know, the Clintons, the Bushes, the Obamas, they've been abusing this stuff for decades, and you know what? It's never going to change. No, I think it is going to change. I really do. And my sources are telling me that. But also, if you look at other events that are occurring, you know, you've talked about We've been talking about this for a month. The executive order that Donald Trump issued midnight, December 21st, 2017. Greg, you've been talking about it for almost a month. I've been talking about it over a month. Guess what? It took Zero Hedge 6 days to present it, December 27th. And Greg, the lamestream fake media, up until today that I'm aware of, didn't address it. And when they did address it, Bloomberg talked about it being, oh, it's just about Russia and it's just about lobbyists maybe on K Street. Greg, if anyone reads what you're holding up, and they need to just Google, or not Google, DuckDuckGo, executive order, Trump's executive order, December 21st, 2017. If they read that, they'll realize how comprehensive this sweep is.
Oh, it adds to the legislation already out there. So it's anybody inside and outside of the United States. Kevin Shipp, the former CIA whistleblower, CIA officer, said it's the biggest law enforcement undertaking in the history of America. It is domestic and it is foreign. And it is anybody that has helped these people. You mean like people who maybe donated to the Clinton Foundation? You mean like the Clinton Foundation? I mean, people, I don't know if this ensnares them, but a lot of people, the top heads of people, Warren Buffett,
Bill
Gates have donated money. Is this money going to be confiscated? I mean, they've got a huge confiscation program.
Well, not only that, confiscating their money, but they took it as a tax break, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they have huge tax implications of which they potentially can go to jail because their due diligence didn't end when they wrote the check to the Clinton Foundation.
Their assets, anybody that helped these people.
Yes.
If Bill Gates gave, and I think they gave $150 million, somewhere in that neighborhood, don't quote me on that, but it's a lot of money, to the Clinton Foundation, just in general. Yes. And if anybody that helped, it said anybody that helped these people, anybody that did government contracts, anybody that did corruption, anybody, it's just astronomical that the amount of confiscation that could happen as a result of this is stunning. Is it not? And then
No, you're absolutely correct, Greg. And you know what? When you were on my show this past Sunday, and anybody who didn't hear that interview, we posted it on Twitter, please, or go to our website, davejanda.com. Greg did a phenomenal job. And Greg presented this information. And in fact, Greg, this is not something I had told you before, but I heard from some financial people after your interview. And they said, well, when we heard Greg Hunter talking about Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and donating money to the Clinton Foundation, they could be, in fact, potentially on the hook for tax violations and stuff. We said, we really questioned it. They looked into it, Greg, and guess what? They found you were absolutely correct. And in fact, about 24 hours after you spoke about this on my radio show, there was an article that was posted on Zero Hedge about the same thing. They're very similar.
Their assets. I mean, when you take a look at that, I mean, the media is so stupid. They had Mnuchin out there said, well, excuse me, Secretary Mnuchin, you are named in this executive order. Why is the Treasury Secretary named in this executive order in terms of confiscation? I mean, I don't know if they used the word confiscation, but their assets can be blocked. We're talking about property of persons. Property, what does that mean? Stocks, bonds, boats, cars, airplanes, land, farm ground, rare art, diamonds, gold, silver. Doesn't that mean all that?
How about foreign bank accounts also?
That means all that.
All
and then what about this Inspector General report? You're telling me that whether it's Uranium One, this is an all-encompassing report, whether it's Uranium One, whether it's the Clinton global charity fraud, whether it's your email server scandal that covered up the bribery scandal, all this stuff, Comey, Mueller, all these people are multitudes of people are on the hook for being arrested and being prosecuted and having their assets confiscated.
Yes, and I've been told from my sources this actually opens up the door for whatever the Justice Department try to put a lid on the Inspector Generals, not just in the Justice Department, but any other department. So, for example, Eric Holder, when he was the Attorney General, I think he's in the boat on this big time from what I've heard. Eric Holder prevented many entities, many agencies, including the Inspector General prior to looking at the Fast and Furious event, where in the Obama administration, overseen by the Justice Department, Eric Holder, arms were delivered to Mexican drug cartels. They were trying to work out a situation where they could confiscate potentially guns in the United States. Obviously, that backfired, no pun intended. And what ended up happening is we ended up with a dead border agent.
Brian Terry.
Brian Terry. And so the bottom line here is that investigation was squashed by Eric Holder. Well, it's my understanding what this Inspector General's report does is it calls into question how Inspector Generals were also suppressed from investigating what was happening within our own government. And it opens up a Pandora's box. It opens it all up.
Mark Taylor came out, and this is I heard him say this. He is the guy that wrote the Trump prophecies, and yes. He said on the day Trump was elected, he says, "I keep getting these military tribunals. I'm getting this message that we're going to have military tribunals. This is hundreds, if not thousands, of people that are involved in corruption, and we haven't even got into the human trafficking, the corruption, the money, the absolute lawlessness in America. You're saying all that's up for grabs, and it starts with this A, executive order,
yeah,
and B, which adds on to the legislation already in place, and B, this Inspector General's report that just got delivered to Congress."
And two other things about that executive order that you bring up is, one, in that executive order, Trump declared a national emergency.
Yes.
Right. Now, when he did that, that empowers him to utilize every branch of the federal government and every agency in the federal government, including the military, to implement what has been proposed in this executive order. And then you add to it, Glad, you mentioned about the human trafficking. The human trafficking is a huge issue. Greg, you and I have spoken about this before, and many people I know where I live here in the People's Republic of Ann Arbor, Michigan say, oh, it might be a couple people, but it's not as prevalent as you think. Really? Listen to the interview I did with Craig Sorer, former Navy SEAL Team 6 fella, who has launched a Viper team, former SEALs, Rangers, Delta Force folks that are taking out the pedophile networks. It's on DaveJanda.com right there. Boom. You can hit it, listen to it. And he goes into great depth. But Donald, at December 29th, President Donald J. Trump proclaims January 2018 as National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. First paragraph. During National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month, we recommit ourselves to eradicating the evil of enslavement. Human trafficking is a modern form of the oldest and most barbaric type of exploitation. It has no place in our world. This month, we do not simply reflect on this appalling reality. We also pledge to do all in our power to end the horrific practice of human trafficking that plagues innocent victims around the world. Look, that just didn't happen. That happened in conjunction with that executive order that you've outlined, that you've been talking about for a month. That with the delivery of this Inspector General's report on January 12th. All this isn't just coincidence, Greg.
The Arwan brothers, is that also in the Inspector General's report? I mean, Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the Democrats allowed the Arwan brothers, apparently what's been reported already, the access to the computers at top key players in the Democratic National Committee and the Democrat Party in Congress and in Senate. We just cut off aid to Pakistan. Arwan brothers are from Pakistan. Is this report also have some tidbits about or some information about the Arwan brothers? It's 1,002 pages. So does it?
It would be hard for me to believe that of 1.2 million pages, there isn't something about the security as it relates to the violation of the security and the confidentiality of what's happening in Congress, and the Arwan brothers are not in the middle of that.
That's another. We have crimes dating back a couple of decades. We have Robert Mueller. He was the head of the FBI when they were doing Uranium One. He had a deep source, a deep investigator, a deep undercover investigator for 5 or 6 years. What about
with Mueller and Uranium One? There's actually evidence through WikiLeaks that Julian Assange has released, and let's give Julian Assange a big shout out for being one of the true freedom fighters of this entire world. That I think in decades down the line, people are going to look back and say, "Wow, that guy really played a huge role in the system being reset for the better." Robert Mueller in WikiLeaks was named. That in, I believe it was in 2009, took a flight to Russia with a uranium sample, high-grade uranium, for the Russians to inspect. Now, supposedly it was some uranium that was confiscated in a deal out of Georgia, not the state of Georgia, but the country. But what this could well have been, it appears, is Mueller, who was then the FBI, took this private plane with this tarmac meeting. You know, the Clintons are really great with tarmac meetings. Took this flight to Russia, delivered a sample of the uranium that ultimately would be transferred in the Uranium One deal, to give him a sample to make sure that it was good enough for him.
The amount of
wasn't up to his eyeballs in this.
The amount of, I mean, you look at the dossier, which was paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC, who was running the DNC. You look at the people at the FBI, senior people, not the rank and file people, the senior people there, Comey, McCabe, the deputy, this Wasserman, Schultz with the Arwan brothers. You got the guy having an affair with one of the people, the FBI guy, Strzok,
the same guy who interviewed Flynn, the same guy who gave Hillary a pass, right?
The exoneration. They didn't even finish the months before they even finished the investigation, which has got to be some sort of crime. And my world, I think, would be some sort of obstruction of justice or dereliction of duty, or both. You have just an unbelievable amount of crime going on with this. I mean, we're going to see mass arrests. We're going to see the indictment of Hillary Clinton and her underlings. Is that right?
I believe that's going to happen, and I know people believe that that's pure fantasy, and that is just not going to happen. But I truly believe, I truly believe that this Inspector General's report, and understand something, the details of this 1.2 million page document is not going to come out through the bought-off lamestream fake media anytime soon. And even Congress, they're going to parcel this thing out. Okay, it's not all of a sudden this huge document dump. There might be some alternative media sources, in particular, I would think, with Julian Assange, that's going to be releasing certain components that reinforce this, then gives Congress, oh, well, Julian Assange brought this out. Well, actually, it's been confirmed in the Inspector General's report. Here it is. I think we're going to see that. And you mentioned the dossier, that dossier that was created essentially paid for by the Clinton campaign. And then that dossier, and there's where the sinister part was then utilized to get these FISA warrants to surveil Trump. Well,
that's outrageous.
That's the whole story. That's not the whole story, Greg. That's cover. Okay. You see, they were surveilling Trump, and millions of other Americans, probably most of the people that are listening to us right now, through something that the Obama administration did several years ago. And what they did is Brennan, the head of the CIA, known globalist, Clapper, known globalist, the director of national intelligence under Obama, they hired a guy by the name of Dennis Montgomery. Dennis Montgomery created a platform called the Hammer. The Hammer surveilled all internet activity, financial transactions, emails, and phone calls of millions of Americans. That's a violation of millions of Americans' Fourth Amendment rights. So this whole dossier thing was cooked up to give them cover because of what they did illegally, that not just impacted, because they're going to say, well, this dossier thing was bad, but it impacted Trump and a couple other people. No. What they're covering up is what they did to millions of Americans. And that's what this is about. And this has been confirmed to me. In fact, if you go to our website, davejanda.com, under the preview of Operation Freedom, right there is an interview I did with General Tom McInerney, who had information from Admiral Ace Lyons. And we did that interview, and he talked about this very fact. And in fact, Larry Klayman, great attorney, who I've also had on my show, and I think you've had on yours as well. Larry was representing Montgomery. He took Montgomery to the FBI and he had a deposition under oath to the FBI that Comey was aware of. And subsequent to that deposition, under oath, where he talked about all this, Comey went in front of Congress, and when he was asked, well, are Americans surveilled surreptitiously by the United States government? No, I'm not aware of that. And understand, Clapper did the same thing. They both, just for that alone, belong in jail. Period.
Well, this was under the Obama administration. Could Obama get mud splattered all over him too? Could he be in trouble?
Well, Yeah, and here's why. This is why the Inspector General's report, looking at the Hillary Clinton email and server, Obama, it has been shown through WikiLeaks, had a pseudonym, a fake name, that he was emailing Hillary on her private.
That's right. I reported that.
That's a violation of the Espionage Act. Period.
So he knew all about it. He knew.
Absolutely.
I want to get into something that's a bit of breaking news here, and I want to get into a little economic deal as well. But the breaking news, the Hawaiian thing, it's more than just a fat finger. You're saying it was a real incoming missile, and it came from who?
So
your sources.
I'll lay it on the line. When I heard this, I felt, you know what? Somebody hit the wrong button. That some state official didn't realize what they were doing. And you and I have had tech problems, you know, every day we try to get on the computer, okay? And I thought, okay, this was some state official, because remember, Jamie Lee Curtis is out there. She's busting Trump's chops that this is all because of him, that this false alarm happened. I'm not sure where she came up with that other than being a globalist zealot. But so I really thought, Greg, I felt that this was probably a fat finger issue until earlier today. Now, you and I were talking earlier today, and between when you and I spoke and when this interview started, I got a phone call from one of my deep-level sources who I have trusted for many years, and everything this source has told me, at times I think, is either wrong or it's not going to be proven to have happened, okay? And every single time this source has told me something, it might take weeks, it might take months, but it's always been found to be proven true, okay? And I was speaking to this source actually about the Inspector General's report and its ramifications. And this source was very steadfast about this report is legit. This report is going to be parceled out, as I mentioned earlier in this interview. It's going to have significant ramifications about the rule of law. But with this also, then we got into a further conversation about Hawaii. And I said, I go, boy, the state official and they hitting the wrong button, and and then why did it take 38 minutes for them to correct it? I mean, come on. When I make a mistake when I'm on the on my computer, I usually catch it within a couple, and I'm not that brilliant of a person when it comes to IT stuff. And he said, well, Dave, maybe it was the real deal. And he said, what are you talking about? He goes, look, there's some huge problems in China right now in the military. And you have factions of the military that are pro-Xi Jinping and pro-Trump, and a big faction of the military that's anti-Xi Jinping and anti-Trump. And what this source told me, and again, I've never found this source to be wrong, and was that there was actually a missile fired. And the missile was brought down by the United States anti-missile program, okay, that we took it down. And then I asked, well, who shot this missile? And he goes, it was a submarine-based missile, and it appeared to be it was from a Chinese sub. And then I said, well, what happened? What was the response? And he said the response was that this was a renegade faction within the Chinese military that was in charge of this sub, that fired this missile, and in fact, the Chinese Navy, supportive of Xi Jinping, was the ship that then took out that submarine.
So they were trying to start a war.
Yeah.
Wow. That's some news there, buddy.
Well, again, and there are going to be people doubt this, and they'll say, I didn't hear Oprah talking about this. I didn't see it discussed in The View. I didn't see it on CNN or CBS or I know. I realize that. I'm just telling you what I was told, and I was told I could speak about this.
What about the yuan oil deal coming up in just a few days?
So this is what this source said. I said, look, how in the world can we confirm that this is in fact true? And the source told me that they believed over the ensuing weeks and months, information is going to come out to corroborate what I just said. But they said if you want an early indicator, if this is correct, and the problems that are occurring in China, on January 18th, a big financial event is supposed to occur. And that is the implementation of buying oil for Chinese currency. The so-called petro-yuan exchange. Right now, to buy oil on the international market, you have to convert your currency, no matter what country you're in, into dollars, and then you buy your oil. Well, with this, you could buy oil contracts with Chinese currency, not U.S. currency, and then you could convert that Chinese currency into gold. So in other words, gold, by the transitive property, could buy oil. Now, that's a big deal. That's what the whole petrodollar is built on. That's what's made us fat and sassy in the United States, the petrodollar, the fact that our currency was being used for all international trade. And as the dollar gets diminishes in its role in trade, so does our power in the world. So what this individual told me is that you'll know that there are problems in the Chinese government and there is a fractionation if you see on January 18th that petro-yuan contract is going to be delayed. It will not go into effect on the 18th of January. It's going to be delayed a number of weeks, if not 60 days, if not several months. And that's an indication. So we will know if there's any credence at all to what I was told. We should know by January 18th. If the petro-yuan contract goes into effect, it shows that dichotomy within the Chinese government isn't as great as I was told. And it also, I think, would indicate that, well, wait a minute, what about this Chinese sub-story? If you find that that oil for yuan contract is put on hold, it does lend credence to the information that I was told, I believe.
China has also downgraded our debt. They have said that we went from A- to triple B.
Yes.
The dollar has been under a lot of pressure lately. Friday and Monday was down a 0.5% a day, then up a little bit on Tuesday. What's going on with the economic system? Is the deep state, is the shadow government going to strike back at Trump by taking down the system?
Well, I believe yes, but I believe what Donald Trump has been trying to do. I think Donald Trump is very aware of the financial problems behind the curtain with our country, with our national debt, with information that you've talked about and I've talked about on my show, that being the missing $21 trillion that Catherine Austin Fitts and Dr. Mark Skidmore have presented.
That's just two branches of government.
That's right. That's
DOD, HD.
Right. That's it. That's not the entire government. So that's 21 trillion that's missing. Now, the good news is that, right after you did, when I do a report, Greg, it's like a little pebble in the ocean, and there's little ripples. But when you do a report, it's like a tsunami, right? So right after you did the report with Mark Skidmore, all of a sudden the Army's talking about doing an audit, and then this just hit the other day. Army finds $830 million in missing helicopters.
Oops.
As first As first ever audit begins. And a preview is what to come. Norquist, who's the controller of the Department of Defense, told the House Armed Services Committee that an initial Army audit found 39 UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters valued at $830,700,000 were not adequately recorded in the property system, and the Air Force identified 478 structures and buildings at 12 installations that were not in its real property system. In other words, these helicopters were simply, quote, missing, end quote, on the books. Greg, come on. And that all happened after you did your report. As I said, you're like a tsunami. And the point is that, as you mentioned, there are huge financial problems in this country behind the curtain. And frankly, love him or hate him, Donald Trump is a master at handling bankruptcies.
Yes.
Okay? Right? And I believe he's there He's there for a reason. And I believe one of the reasons he's there is to negotiate the bankruptcy of the United States and make it so that the reset isn't such a huge catastrophic event for millions of Americans.
You know, he just gave a pass for all kinds of crimes, rigging, LIBOR, money laundering, just a variety of crimes to 5 big banks: Deutsche Bank, Citi, J.P. Morgan, UBS, and Barclays. And what struck me with that, and I don't have any information on this, I have no sources on this. What struck me oh my gosh, he's worried about the financial system going down, and he's got to let these guys go because he can't add any more complexity to the system that is already weak. They've got all these credit default swaps out. They've got all this stuff on subprime, not subprime, but on junk bonds. They're all backed up with credit default swaps that can't perform if a big one happens. I mean, if something small happens, sure, but if something big goes down, I mean, we're not as good as what people are saying that we are. Correct? I mean, John Williams at ShadowStats.com says we've been bottom bouncing all these years. We haven't really had a real recovery, at least not Main Street. We have on Wall Street, but not on Main Street.
The only recovery we've had has been on Wall Street, and that's because the Federal Reserve banks of the world, the central banks, the globalists have been pumping fake money into the system to prop it up, to make people think everything's okay. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's not all. We're $20 trillion in debt. We got $21 trillion that you and I have alluded to through the hard and great work of Dr. Mark Skidmore and Catherine Austin-Fitts. Another $21 trillion that's missing just from 2 departments, as you've outlined. You know, we have huge financial problems, and let me tell you something, Greg. I truly believe these 5 banks should not be left off the hook, okay? But a very smart woman in my life, my wife, said to me the other day, you know, Dave, if you get your wish and all these banks are exposed and they all implode, think what's going to happen to the average person in this country.
Oh, Mad Max.
She goes, Dave, is that a world you want to live in? She said, so Dave, maybe as opposed to your surgeon's approach to life, where you cut through the skin and you go right to the problem. She goes, maybe Dave, you have to gently go through the skin, and maybe you have to dissect a little bit slower than you're used to or you want to get to the problem, and give the body a chance, in this case our country, a chance to heal from within before you get rid of all of the cancer. Now, I wish Donald Trump would have said, look, these 5 banks are involved in criminal, nefarious activities, but our country is not in the position to take them down at this point. We're going to get to them. But we can't get to them today because we have other more pressing problems that I'm concerned that if we do that and address these other pressing problems, that will implode the fabric of our country. That's what I would have preferred, as opposed to, okay, well, these 5 banks get a pass for 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, but he didn't give them a pass forever. But the biggest fish to fry are all these criminals in the government. I mean, whether it's the Arwan brothers, whether it's members of the DNC and members of the Republican Party. It's we the people against we the swamp, and the swamp is deep and muddy.
Right, and as we've outlined earlier, Greg, we have to establish the rule of law again in this country. The rule of law for every American, not just those that they want to persecute, but every American, including globalists and non-globalists, has to be reestablished. Okay? And right now, if we went after these 5 banks with where we are with the judicial system in the United States, the court system, I don't know. I don't know if these people would get prosecuted, be found to be, no matter what they did, found to be guilty.
Move on. Right? Julian Assange. You got sources on Julian Assange, and this is good. And that he was at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and he was given citizenship in Ecuador. And your sources say, where is he now? Where is Julian Assange, and what are they going to do with him?
Well, it's my understanding that Julian Assange is safe. It's my understanding from my sources that Julian Assange was extracted from the Ecuadorian embassy with the help and support of the Trump administration, and that Julian Assange is now safe in Switzerland.
And what's he going to do? He's got to be doing something for that kind of large net.
You know what I think he's doing? I think he is. I think he's a huge source of information through WikiLeaks and through the information that they have. And remember about WikiLeaks, a lot of people hammer WikiLeaks, but the bottom line is they've been presenting information for over 10 years.